Let's discuss all of the JavaScript interview questions. This is level 1 of the JavaScript interview series. Please like and subscribe. In our JavaScript interview series, the first question is what are the primitive and non-primitive data types in JavaScript? To answer this question, you first need to have a clear understanding of what is even data types. So let me give you a very simple explanation of what is a data type using an analogy. So let's suppose you are going to buy a car. Now you need to decide what type of car do you want or do you need. So do you need an SUV, a sedan, a hatchback, a sports car, or maybe an electric vehicle? So this is the type of the car. So this is the data and this is the type of the data. So in JavaScript, to be honest, in programming language, every types of data has some kinds of type, okay? But let's be specific to JavaScript. Now in JavaScript, data types are classified into two parts. One, it can be primitive, and it can be non-primitive, okay, like this, primitive. Now the answer to this question is very simple. So the answer to this question is how data types are stored in JavaScript. That's it. So if you want to answer this question, you need to understand how data types are stored in JavaScript. So primitive data types are stored in stack and non-primitive data types are stored in heap. So let me now give you a very simple explanation of all of this, and it will become crystal clear what is the difference between primitive and non-primitive data types in JavaScript. Okay, let's now talk about how data types are stored in JavaScript. But first, let's have a very simple overview of all the data types that is classified into primitives and non-primitives. I'm not going to explain you what are these data types, but to understand this, you can watch the complete beginner friendly JavaScript course. There I have explained like literally like everything that a beginner needs to know if they are starting to learn JavaScript. It took me almost 1 year to complete this course. So please, if you want to understand JavaScript, do check out. Okay, so here I have a very simple comment. So primitive data types are string, number, boolean, undefined, null, begin, symbol, and non-primitive data types are objects, array, function, date. Now what is the difference between primitives and non-primitive data types? Well, this is the difference between primitives and non-primitive data types. So primitives are immutable, you cannot mutate them, but non-primitive data types are mutable, you can mutate them, means you can update the value. Okay, mutable simply means updating the value. Now how does primitive data types are stored? Well, they are stored by value. And what about non-primitive data type? This is stored by reference. So this is the difference between primitive and non-primitive data type. It's not what are primitive and non-primitive data types. No, the interviewer is not asking you what are primitive and non-primitive data types in JavaScript. No, you need to understand the question. The interviewer wants you to understand or expects you to understand the technicality of primitive and non-primitive data types in JavaScript. So never answer them that hey, primitives are string, number, etc, non-primitives are object array. No, you need to answer what is the exact difference between primitive and non-primitive data types in JavaScript, and the exact difference is how primitive and non-primitive both of them are stored and how their values are read. So let me now explain you all of this by writing a few lines of code. Always remember that primitives are stored by value and non-primitives are stored by reference. Now what does it mean? Well, let's write a few lines of code and then we are going to understand all of this. So first we are going to understand the code of primitive value that is passed by value. Just showed you. Okay, so stored by value. Okay, so first here I'm going to say let a equals to 10. Very simple. Okay, and then let b equals to what? A. Now here what happens is not like this but like this. So b gets a copy of a's value. Okay, and now if I say b, hey b, now your value is 20, and if I console.log, come on, console.log a, What do you think will be the output? Will it be 10 or 20? Take a guess. Pause the video and try to take a guess. So I'm going to continue straight away. So the answer will be 10. In this example, the behavior demonstrates how primitive data types are handled in JavaScript. Since primitive data types are stored by value, modifying the copied variable b does not affect the original variable a. So let me give you a step-by-step breakdown of these 4 lines of code. So on line 27, we have let a equals to 10. We have declared a variable called a and we have assigned it the value of 10. Pretty clear? And then let b equals to a. Now here we have created a new variable b and now we have assigned it a value of a, that is 10. Now here's the catch. Don't get confused. When we say b equals to a, then it's not b equals to a, but it's b equals to a's value, that is 10. Both of them are different. b is equals to a for sure, but b is not equals to a but a's value, because we are talking about primitive data types, right? So here I have written this comment specifically so that it can become crystal clear. So when you say b equals to a, then b gets a copy of a's value. And what is a's value? Well, a's value is 10. We do not point to the variable, but we point to the value stored by the variable. So this is how JavaScript works. It is what it is. You are not pointing to the name of the variable, but the value that it holds. So that's why on line 29, when I say b equals to 20, by the way, at this point, b equals to a, both a and b are independent of each other. Okay, both of them are different variables. Now here, when I say b equals to 20, the value of b is updated to 20. Now this change does not affect a because b holds a copy of the original value. Let me explain you again. If I say b equals to 20, then you may think that, hey, if you say b equals to 20, good, then this b equals to a. Now it means that a will also be 20, right? But see, when I say a, then the output of a is 10, it's not 20. You have a good question. You are right. If v equals to 20 and if b equals to a, then of course a will be 20 as well. So a should have been 20, just like b. If I say b, if I print b as well, you'll see of course b is 20. But why not a is 20 as well? Well, because b is holding the copy of a's value. It's not exactly holding a. A is holding its original value. B is holding the copy of a's value. So this is primitive data type. So this is how primitive data types are stored. When you say console.log a, let me exclude b. When you say console.log a, the value of a is still 10 because primitive data types are immutable and they are passed by value. Okay. So key takeaway with this example is that primitive data types like numbers, strings, booleans are passed by value. When you assign a primitive variable to another, a copy of value is created. Now changes to the copied variable do not affect the original variables. So this is very simple primitive data types. I hope you get the concept of primitive data types cleared in your mind. Now again, I will be showing you the graph. Don't worry, I will be showing you the presentation like how engines actually work. This is not it, but for now let's now understand another example of non-primitive data types. So here I have an object obj1 equals to, let's say, name equals to, I'll say code. Okay, pretty simple. I have a very simple object, and then let obj2 equals to obj1. Interesting. We have a similar example. Okay, now here if I say obj maybe what 2 dot name, and now equals to, if I update this to block, and now if I console.log obj1 dot name, what do you think will be the output? Keep this code in mind and always remember that this is non-primitive data type. This is primitive data type. Just understand this. Okay, this is not primitive data type. What do you think? Do you think the output will be block? If I save this, yes, the output is block. Now the name got updated. In this case, the value of a did not changed, but here it changed. What is the difference? Well, non-primitive data types are passed by reference. What does it mean? Well, let obj equals to name code, okay, a very simple object, and let obj2 equals to obj1. When you say obj2 equals to obj1, then obj2 references the same object as obj1. Okay, let me copy the comment from another code editor. So right here, like this. So obj2 equals to obj1, so obj2 references the same object, so it is referencing the object. See, b equals to a, so this b is referencing to the value, but no, obj2 equals to obj1, then this obj1 is not referencing to the value, but it is referencing to the object itself. So that's why it is called as passed by reference. See, copies the value stored by a reference, and right here, so stored by reference. So primitive data types are stored by value, non-primitive data types are stored by reference. So in this case, b equals to a, b gets the value, but in this case, obj2 equals to obj1, obj2 is not pointing to the value, but obj2 is pointing to the object itself. So it is just pointing to the same object as we have mentioned here. So this is how JavaScript is built. This is not something that I'm doing on my own, no. So that's why when you say obj2 dot name equals to block, then obj2's name property changes to block. And so when you say console.log obj1 dot name, when you say obj1 dot name, so this line of code exactly mutates the original name variable, so name property. Okay, if I have another, like, yeah, age 30, if I save this is a very simple object, right? So this object is a data on its own. If I print this cl, come on, looks like cl snippet messed up, but anyway, I will be fixing it a little bit later. So obj1, this is a very simple object, name code is t. Okay, but where is obj2? If I console.log obj2, we do not have any object called obj2. But see, when I say obj2 equals to obj1, then exact object and its data was copied and it was stored on this variable, that is object2. And so when I say obj2.name to be block, now when you say obj1.name, you see that now the data is updated to block, and that's why when you print obj1 right here and obj2 as well, both of them will be updated with name being block. So this is reference type. Now I know all of this is not making much sense to you, so let's now see an analogy, and then all of this will be crystal clear. In JavaScript interview series, question number 2 and 3 are pretty similar, so I'm not going to discuss about them individually. I'm just going to include both of the question in this single video. So the question is, explain the difference between var, let and const, and what is hoisting. Why does var behave differently than let and const? So let's now discuss about them. So var, let and const are three ways by which we can declare a variable in JavaScript. Let's say that we are developing a game, and when we are developing a game, then we need to keep track of the scores, level, player name, rankings, etc. We can have different use cases of using different scenarios, right? So we can create variables. I can say a score, but for that we'll have to use the JavaScript keyword through which the JavaScript engine can identify this name as a variable. So here we are going to say, hey JavaScript engine, this is a variable. We have said var, so using var keyword we converted this score text into a variable, and now we can assign it a value. So initially our score is 0. Now the variables created using the var keyword can be updated later down the line. So here if you say console.log a score, you see you get 0. But now if you say a score equals to a score plus 1, and now if you try to print a score, now you will see that the score will be 1. and similarly if you again do this, now the score will be 2. Okay, so variables created using the var keyword can be updated, can be mutated, updated or mutated, both means same. Okay, now similarly a variable created using the let keyword can also be updated. So I can say initial level equals to 0, and then here I can say initial level, you see initial level is 0, but here I can say initial level equals to initial level plus 1. So if someone wins the game, then we can update the level to level 2. Currently the level is 0, but when someone wins the initial game, the starting game, then we can update their level, and we can update their level to a rather more difficult level. Okay, so now the level will be 1. A shorthand of doing this is this, so initial level plus plus. So this line of code can be converted into this short line of code, that is initial level plus plus. Okay, this is increment operator, by the way. If I save this, we get 1. But here is a catch. See, let, var and let can be mutated. We changed the value later in our program. But if you have a variable called as a const, if you have created a variable using the const variable, const keyword to be exact, for example I can say maybe new score, or maybe health bar. Currently the health bar is 50%. console.log health bar 50%. But if somehow the player wins something that can be used to increase their health bar, here if you say health bar plus plus, then there will be an error, assignment to constant error. If I save this, you see we get assignment to constant variable. So a variable created using the const keyword cannot be mutated in the future. So this is the difference between var, let and const. But this is not the only difference between var, let and const. We also have a little bit more difference, like we have the difference of scoping, hoisting. So far we just have understood the difference of mutability. So var and let can be updated and mutated, but const cannot be mutated. You cannot update the value of const. Const in mathematical terms also means constant. So a very good example will be the value of pi. It always remains 14156. I guess I'm correct. So the value of pi is never going to change. No matter what you do, the value of pi will always remain something similar to this. Again, I'm telling you, I don't exactly remember the value of pi, but this would be somewhere closer to this one. Okay, pardon me if this is not correct, but I'm just trying to explain you. So the value of pi will always remain this in mathematical terms. You cannot actually update this. So if you try to do this pi equals to now this is, then again you are going to get assignment to constant variable. See, you get assignment to constant variable. The error is coming from this line, so if I comment both of these, you'll still get error. You see, now the error is from this line 59. So pi is this one. Okay, so you cannot update the variable declared using the const variable. Now you can ask me that, okay, I understood. So var, let and const, one difference is mutability. What's the next difference? So the next difference is scoping, and then another one is how hoisting works in JavaScript. So let's not talk about scoping, and then we'll talk about hoisting. So one difference is of mutability. Another difference is with respect to scoping. In JavaScript, scoping determines where variables, functions, and objects are accessible in your code. So there are two main types of scope. One is, should I write the comment? Yes. One is global scope, and then we have the local scope. In local scope, we again have two types. One is function scope, and then we have the block scope. Let's discuss about all of this one by one. So a very simple example of global scope is this one. So a global scope is a variable declared outside of any function or block. Okay, very simple. Variables declared outside of any function or block are always in global scope. So if you have something that is declared in global scope, they can be accessed from anywhere in the code. So a very simple example is here. Let me explain it in very simplest form. See, on line 66 we have a global var that is declared using the let keyword. I am global because this is this line is not inside any function or any block. So this line is sitting independently on its own. So it does not matter how nested you go, you can always access this global variable. So when you say console.log global variable, you will get the output. So here when I call the function, we will get this output from this function, and so we can access this global variable right here as well. So if I save this, see, we get I am global. So even if I create another function inside this function, I'll say function inside, okay, and if I call inside, and if I create another function here inside 2, no matter how deep you go inside 2, you can always access this global var. Okay, global var, come on, I need to copy this again, global var. Okay, if I save this, see, I'm global var. Okay, maybe I can create this string. I can say dollar template string just to explain you. I will say I am inside the inside to function. See, I am inside the inside to function, I am global. Okay, so this line is coming, so this data is even accessible inside of these nested functions. Okay, hence global scope has all the codes that can be accessed from anywhere inside this level1.js file. And then we have the local scope. So variables declared inside a function or block are in the local scope, and in local scope we have two types. One is function scope, and then we have the block scope. A very simple example of function scope is this one. We have a function. Inside this function we have a variable called as local var. Now this local var is only going to be accessible inside this function. So here it is accessible, so there will be no problem. But the moment you try to access this local variable outside of this function, then it will result into a reference error. If I save this, you see we get a reference error, local var is not defined. Why? Because this local var is in this function. So this is function scoped. So this variable is function scoped, so you cannot access this variable outside of this function. But if I comment this code, then you will see that now we no longer have any error. So it is now saying that I am local. Okay, so this is function scope. And then we also have again a newly nested scope, that is a block scope. So a very simple example of a block scope is this one. So if you have a block, so this if is a block. Okay, a very simple block. So if you have a block, if you say let block var, I am a block scope. If you try to access this block var keyword right here, this is accessible right here. But the moment you try to access this variable outside of this block, again this will result into an error. If I save this, you see I get an error. So pretty simple. Function scope, things declared inside this function will only be accessible inside this function. Local scope is well, block scope is also pretty similar. Things declared within a block can only be accessible inside a block, it cannot be accessible outside of the block. Okay, so always remember about this blocking. Now this scoping thing. Now how does var, let, and const works with respect to scope? So key points about scoping is variables declared using the var keyword, they are function scoped, which means that if you declare a variable using var keyword, then it will be accessible throughout the function. So if you have a function I will say lol, very simple function. I don't know why I keep creating function names like this, but if I say if true, see, this is a very simple function. Inside this function we have a block. If I say var x equals to 10, I can access this x. See, we get, come on, I need to comment some of the code. Block var is creating error, so comment this. See what happened? Well, I need to call this lol function. See, I get this output of 10, right? And if I try to access this x outside of this if block, I will still get the value of x. I get 10. Okay, so this I just talked about this thing here. Just told you that local scope is somewhere where if you have to see in this local scope, when we created this block var, then this is accessible only inside this block. But a variable declared using the var keyword, even if it is inside a block, but if it is inside a function and if it is inside a block, then if it is created using the var keyword, again this can be confusing. Okay, have patience and try to understand this. So if variable declared using var keyword, if even if it is inside a block, it is still accessible outside of that block if it is created using the var keyword. See, var x is 10 inside this block is accessible, but it is accessible right here as well. Okay, so this is local scope, this is function scope, but a variable declared using the var keyword is accessible here and here as well. That's why we are getting the output of 10. But if you try to do the same thing with let, then no, error, reference error, x is not defined. Same will happen with const, x is not defined. Okay, so yes, this is the difference between var, let and const with respect to a scope. So let me write this comment. So come on, where is function scoped and let and const are block scoped. So if you have a variable using let, if you have a variable declared using let and const, then it is not going to be accessible outside of the declared block. It is only going to be usable the moment or the location where it is created. Now there's a time, it's time to test something. If I say function 1, okay, very simple, 1, I'm going to call 1. If I create a variable called as let inside equals to lol, I am inside, and if I have a function inside 1, so this function is inside 1. If I quickly call it inside 1, and if I try to access this inside variable right here, we can totally do this. Okay, if you have a children gets access to every data of their parent. So if this is the parent, let me change the name to parent, say parent, and then this child will get access like this. Okay. Child will get access to data that the parent has. Okay, so yeah, even if you go multiple level down, I'll say grand child is my sign, access your grand's property. Okay. See, you again get lol, I'm inside. Okay, so scoping always works from top to bottom. Okay, if the data is with the parents, the children can certainly access it, but it does not work vice versa. So if your grandchildren has something, for example, if it has a chocolate equals to dairy milk, you cannot access the chocolate of your kid. So parents cannot have access to the kid's chocolate. I don't know why, but this is just a very simple illiterate example maybe, but it will create a reference error. So yeah, if you are a parent, your kids will always have access to certain things, but if your kid has something, then it will be a nightmare for you to access those things, especially if it is some sweet item, maybe chocolate or chocolate. So yeah, now you get a reference error, chocolate is not defined. Next up is hoisting. So hoisting is fairly a very simple mechanism. In hoisting, what happens is that a certain data is accessible even before it is declared. Okay, so if you declare a variable called as a equals to 10, then somehow you can access this variable a even before it is declared. So a is declared on line 122, then you can access it on line 121. See, the output will be undefined. We are getting an error, so we are getting error from this line. So let me comment this entire code. Okay, now you see that we get undefined. See, we are not getting an error. See, you can ask me that in other programming languages like Java or Python, if you try to do this, you will get an error. Why? Because you have declared a variable on line 122, and hey, you are trying to access that on 121. It doesn't make sense. But in JavaScript, you can do this because somehow using hoisting, the definition is moved to the top of the scope chain, that is the global scope. Okay, so now at global scope, the value of this a is undefined. Okay, if you access it right here, you will get the output, but if you try to access a even before it is declared, it will give you undefined. So variable created using the var keyword, they are hoisted, but they are hoisted to undefined. But if you try to do the same thing with the let keyword, then it will give you reference error, because variables created using the let keyword as well as the const keyword, they are not hoisted. It will bring you a reference error. So this is the difference between var, let and const, and why does var behave differently than let and const. Okay, Now, I'm going to give you some definitions with which you can actually proceed forward. So if someone asks you what is hoisting, then just tell them that hoisting is a JavaScript behavior where variable and function declarations are moved to the top of their scope during the compilation phase, even before the code is executed. So uh, uh, that is how actually JavaScript executes code. However, the way hoisting works differs between var, let, and const. So variables declared using the var keyword, they are hoisted, but they are hoisted to undefined. Variables declared using let and const, they are not at all hoisted, so it will result into a reference error. Okay. So always remember this. So I think this is a very simple example. Now I want to show you one graph. Let me quickly show you. First of all, I will have to take a screenshot of this, and so it is here. Okay, so key difference in hoisting. So keyword var, function global hoisted, yes it is hoisted, but it is hoisted to undefined. Don't bother about temporal dead zone as of now, probably we'll try to discuss it later down the line. But let scope is block scope, const is block scope. See, that's why all of this works simultaneously. Blocking, scoping, hoisting, all of this is interconnected words. That's why I'm talking about all of them all at once. So initialized during hoisting, no. So a variable declared using let keyword, they are not hoisted, and not even variables declared using the const keyword, they are also not hoisted. Variables declared using the var keyword, only these are hoisted. Okay, now always remember that never use var to declare your variable, because it somehow brings unexpected result. So always use let and const. Let if you have the use cases of updating the data of variable later down the line, use let. And if you are certain that the data does not need to be mutated, then use const. Okay, so always stick to let and const. Var is an old school thing, skip var. Do understand how var works. If someone asks you how var works, what is difference between var, let, and const, just explain them, but please avoid using var to declare variables. The next question in our JavaScript interview series is, what is the difference between null and undefined? In JavaScript, both null and undefined represent the absence of a value, but they are used in different contexts and have several differences. So the first difference is in their meaning and how they are used. So undefined means a variable has been declared but is not assigned a value yet. For example, when you declare a variable called as x, but simply do not assign it a value, when you print the value of x, you will get undefined. Pretty straightforward, right? We have declared a variable called x, but currently it does not have any value yet, so it results into undefined. But simply when you assign it a value, for example x equals to 20, now it will be replaced with undefined. Now the variable x no longer is undefined, but simply we do have a value yet. So this is variable declaration, and when you do not provide it a value, it will result into undefined. Okay, so this is the first meaning and this is the first usage. Now what about null? Well, null is an explicit assignment indicating no value or empty. So null represents when you want to have a variable but you simply want to have no value for that variable. Yeah, you do not even want undefined, but you do not even want to leave it empty. So that's why you explicitly set it to a no value variable using this null. So when you say let y, and when you just do this, you are going to get you will get undefined, right? But no, you do not want undefined. You explicitly want to declare a variable, but you do not want it to have any value yet. So you just say at this point in this code base at line 136, the value of y will be null. So it's empty, it's just like a box, but it does not have a value yet. So when you save it, you get null. Now this is not the answer of the question. So the answer of this question will be in a large explanation. So what is the default state? So variables are undefined by default if not initialized, and null must be assigned intentionally. Now you can ask me that, okay, but isn't null and undefined both same? Like why can't we do the same thing that we did here? Do we really have to say null? See, when you say undefined, then the value of x is deliberately set to undefined. It has a value, it is simply not defined yet. Okay, like it's just like yeah, in your mind it does have a value, it's undefined. But when you say why, it's literally empty. You can fill anything right here. Well, you can fill anything right here as well, but it is undefined. The engine knows that it is undefined, but here the engine knows that we do have a variable called as y, but it is simply null. It does not have any value yet. Okay, now we also have a difference of type. So when you say type of, you can use this type of operator to check the type of a variable, a value. When you said type of undefined, you get undefined, and when you said type of null, you will get object. You see, you get object. Now this is a historical bug in JavaScript. I have discussed about this term, why does type of null brings you this object as output in my longer JavaScript course. So yeah, do make sure to watch that. But yeah, this is a very simple difference between null and undefined. Okay, now let me give you a clear clarity between null and undefined. Now you can ask me, tell me, like, why to use null and not undefined, and why to use undefined and not null? So the simple question is, hey, why should we use null, or why should we use undefined? And also, when should we use null and when should we use undefined? Like, I'm really confused. Both of these are similar. I am still unable to understand when to use which one. Now this is a very great question, and you can expect this question from your interviewer. So the choice between null and undefined, tell this to your interviewer. So the choice between using null and undefined depends on the intent and convention. So let me give you a clear breakdown of when to use each with practical examples. So when to use undefined. So you know that when a variable exists but hasn't been assigned a value yet, then JavaScript automatically sets it to undefined. It is clear. So if you say let user response will be undefined. Pretty clear. So this is when you need to use undefined. Okay, so this is when you use undefined, when you just have a variable but it does not have a value yet. Another use case of undefined is when you have a function parameter but it does not have any value yet. So let me copy this code from another code editor. So here I have a very simple function greet. We have a name, console.log name. Now we just called this greet function, but we did not pass any argument to this name parameter. Now we are going to have undefined. So this is a clear misuse of a variable declaration without assigning it a value. I just said misuse, but this is not a misuse. You can do it deliberately. This is no problem here, because you are eventually doing code for fun. This is not a serious function, so this is not a heinous crime to do in programming. But yeah, when you do this does not make sense, but you can do it. Okay, so this is when you have missing function arguments. Now you can ask me that, okay, but why was no argument passed? Well, because you somehow want to skip the argument. So when you skip the argument, then by default name will be undefined. Okay, so this is a very simple example of when to use undefined. The third example is when you have non-existent object properties. So for example, when you have this code, so when you try to access a property that doesn't exist, it will simply return you undefined. So you have const user equals to id1. You are trying to access user with this age data. So this user object does not have any age property, so it will result into undefined. See, this is not resulting into an error. This is simply giving you undefined. In other programming languages, it would have resulted in an error, but in JavaScript we do not have this functionality. It doesn't result into an error. That's why TypeScript was built. We will talk about TypeScript pretty much a little bit later. For this, to counter this, we have TypeScript. But anyway, this is the use case of null defined. Now this is the use case of undefined. Now when to use null? Null should be used as per developers' intentional choices. For example, when you want to explicitly clear a value in future, for example, this code, look at this code, let cart equals to, by the way, let me write this null. Okay, let cart equals to apple and banana. Now when you want to clear this cart and you just want to have a clear cart, nothing in it, you can simply say, hey, now cart equals to null. And now when you say cart, you will see that now cart is empty. See, but now you can have one, excuse me, did some mishaps there. Okay, 1 2. Now you can see that now our array is back on its feet, 1 2. Okay, so this is a real use case of null. We have a cart, we emptied it using null, and now we again inserted some new value to this cart variable, cart array. So now the question is why. Now here it clearly communicates, so the developer clearly communicates that hey, in future I want to clear the cart, so I can use that using this null data. You can simply use this null data type and then you are okay with it. Okay, so this is now done empty on purpose. Another use case can be API call. You can use null to indicate intentional absence. So here you have API response id equals to 1 and address equals to null. So here you are deliberately not providing undefined, but you are providing null. That means that we do not have any data. It's not undefined. No, we are not even providing an undefined data. We are simply providing that hey, there is not even any data. Again, you can ask me why, because it differentiates not provided with undefined. So if you don't have to provide it, then you undefined. Like this, undefined. But if you have to provide as empty, provide as empty, then you use null. Okay. Another example is when you are doing DOM operation. So let me copy this code from another code editor. When you have const element document.getElement by id ghost, but when you say const element, this will bring you null. If you do not have an element that has this id associated with it, it will simply return you an error. It says document is not defined well, because again we do not have an HTML page. That's why we are having this error, document not simply very simple, document is not defined. But if you do this, in a web browser, should I do this? Somehow I'm unable to show you this. Okay, so if I show you this, now you can see it says const element equals to document.getElement by id ghost, console.log element, it brings you null. Okay, so this is the problem here. So this is the difference between null and undefined. One is done deliberately and the other is set to null deliberately, so that we can simply tell the JavaScript engine that hey, null simply means null. That's it. The next question in our JavaScript interview series is why does type of nan return number? So if you do console.log type of nan like this, you see we get number. Now the interviewer can ask you that hey, you know that nan means not a number, so nan means not a number. But when we are trying to check the type of not a number, why are we getting number? So the answer is pretty simple. See, nan stands for not a number, but it's technically of type number in JavaScript, because it's part of the JavaScript 754 floating point standard. Now these are some technical details that I'm getting into, that you really don't need to know this much if you want to clear a JavaScript interview, but just understand it as a straightforward answer is that nan, even though means not a number, it is still a way to check if a number is a valid number or not. So if a number is not a valid number, then it returns you nan. That means not a number, but still the type is still of number, because eventually we are dealing with a number. So if you do console.log 0 divided by 0, a very simple explanation of explaining nan. See, 0 divided by 0, what do you think will be the output? If you are not learning programming, like if you are literally doing some mathematical calculations other than programming, what if I ask you that hey, divide 0 by 0 and tell me what will be the output? Nothing. It's just nothing. So that's why that nothing is represented by nan, but it is still the type of number, because eventually not a number defines the explicit unavailability of the number, but it is still behind the scenes a number, because we are dealing with number. So nan is a numeric placeholder for invalid results. So results that you are not expecting, so the compiler is not expecting from a genuine program. So that's why rather than giving us undefined or an error, it simply prints nan. It's a numeric placeholder for invalid results. Okay, so type of nan literally returns number for consistency with other numeric operations. So I have a few example. I'm just going to paste it. So if I save this, so console.log type of nan, it returns number. Definitely we are getting number. So console.log 0 by 0 nan, invalid math, so we get not a number. So console.log, when you try to check if number dot is nan, and when you try to pass the nan data type itself, then it gives you that true. So yeah, it is. So number dot is nan. So when you try to pass nan to this is nan method, and if you're trying to check if it is still a number or not, it gives you true. Okay, so this is a pretty straightforward explanation of why does type of nan return number. that do you want to know the output for strict mode or without the strict mode. Okay, the next question is related to JavaScript type cohesion. Now the chances of getting these questions asked in a JavaScript interview is very less, but if somehow in any given random day the interviewer decides to check your basic JavaScript knowledge, and if they ask you type cohesion and if you fail to explain them what type cohesion is, it will leave a very bad impression of yours. It will not make you look a very bad developer, because these questions do not really put a lot of weight, but yeah, it will surely leave a very bad impression, because then they will try to understand that you don't know the basics of JavaScript. But if you explain them what type cohesion is, not only it will make look professional, impressive, it will also be a testimony that you know JavaScript from depth. Okay, so what is type cohesion? So type cohesion is JavaScript's automatic conversion of a value from one type to another. For example, here we are adding the string data type 5 to this number data type 3. So what will be the output? So the output that we will get, it will be string 53, because in type cohesion, when you use addition and when you try to concatenate a string data type with a number data type, then JavaScript, using the power of type cohesion, converts the number data type into a string data type. So if you say console.log string 5 added to number 3, the output will be 53, but this is not a string, this is not a number, this is a string. To prove it, I can say console.log and we can call this typeof, and here I can simply say string 5 plus number 3 and you will get a string. Okay, now in a similar way, if this was minus, then what happens is in type cohesion, when you have a minus operator, and when you try to do this, then this will do the reverse type cohesion. In this case, this string will be converted to a number. Okay, so now you will get the output 2 and it will be a number. Okay, so if I say console.log type of, and here if I say 5 minus 3, if I save this, you get 2 and this is a number. So this is pretty simple type cohesion. Plus concatenates, but it makes number data type also look like a string data type. But when you say minus, then minus string coerced to the number. Okay, so it's subtraction. So this is pretty simple difference between so this is what type cohesion is. It's JavaScript's way of automatic converting a value from one type to other. Okay, and here you can see all the examples with other data types as well. Now I could have written all of this using the code as well, but I thought let's generate this using ChatGPT and just paste it here. Okay, because you are going to do these things on your own. I don't need to spoon feed each and everything to you. This way you will not learn. Okay, try to do all of this on your own and try to make sense of it. Next question is, how do you check if a variable is an array in JavaScript? So here let's create array. I will say 1 2 3. Okay, this is pretty simple array, and let's create another variable. I will say data, and I will call it hello. Okay, this is not an array. Okay, now here to check if a variable is an array, we can use the isArray method that we can get by calling the array object. Okay, so how does that work? You can call this array object in JavaScript, and on this object you get this isArray method, and here if you pass isArray both of these variables, and let's duplicate this, and data, you'll get yes, true, the first one is array and the second one is not an array. This works across different frames or windows. Now another way is you can use the instance of array object. Okay, so here I can say console.log, and here I can say isArray instance of an array. So if you do this, it will also give you a way to figure out if it is an array or not. Yes, true, so array is an array. But if you do the same for this data variable, no, false, data is not an array. And another way, using object prototype dot toString method. Okay, so here you can call it console.log, and here you can call the global object, and on this object you have this prototype method, and inside this prototype method you have this toString method, and here you will have to apply this call method, and now you can call this array, and now you will get yes, it's an array, object is an array, and if you call this data, then you see this is a string. Okay, so this is how you figure out the data type, but this is not the recommended way. If you ask me, then the recommended way is this one. Okay, 1 2 3 start. The next question is what is the difference between double equals versus triple equals? Double equals is called loose equality operator. Well, should I call it operator? Many people prefer to call it operator, but let's not call it operator, just call it loose equality. And the triple is called as strict equality, and you should always use this triple equality, and I will show you why. So if you say console.log 5, that is a number data type, double equal 5, that is a string data type. If you try to compare both of these data types, it should print false because this is a number and this is a string. But if you use this loose equality, if you save this, you see you get true. Now why does that happen? Well, because in a loose equality, what happens is the value is compared, not the data type. The value is compared, and if other value is of a different data type, then type cohesion will occur, and then it will be converted to this data type to match. Okay, for example, if I were to take another example, I will say 0, it's a number data type, equal false, it's a boolean data type. Okay, both of them are different data type, but if you save it, you see you get true. Whereas if you use the strict equality, which is always recommended to use, if you say 5 equal strict 5, you will get false. Okay, because this is number and this is a string. In a similar fashion, if you compare 0 to false, you will see you get false, because this is strict equality, and strict equality is being checked here. Okay, so always use triple equality operator unless you intentionally want type cohesion, but always use triple equality operator, because in future when you are going to write complex code, you will be using TypeScript, and TypeScript is developed just because of this one simple fact. Next question is pretty simple. How do you create and invoke a function in JavaScript? So there are multiple ways of creating a function. You can use the function keyword, and here you can say name the function. I will say my name. Okay, so this is one way of creating a function. Your code goes here. I just want to print hi, and to invoke it, you just call it like this, pass the parenthesis, and this is calling or invoking. So this is one way of creating a function, and now we have different types of function, like function expression. Function expression is just a value stored in a variable. So here I can say const hello equals to a very simple function like this. Okay, and here I can say hello, and now to call it again, you will call it the variable, you call the variable itself, and you can call it. So now this brings you hello. Okay, so this is function declaration, and this is function expression. Another way of creating a function is arrow function. Arrow function is also a function expression, only syntax changes. So here I can say, maybe let's use let, I will say greet equals to simple parenthesis and an arrow, and here you can write anything. Here I will say hello greetings, pretty simple. Okay, greetings. Okay, and now to invoke it, you just call the greet variable, and you got hello greetings. So this is 3 ways of how you create a function. Again, this question is very simple. They will not ask you this in JavaScript interview. I just wanted to discuss it anyway. Okay, so yeah, this is how you create and invoke a function. With this, we have completed our level 1, and next we are going to start level 2. Okay, so here this is level 1. I mistakenly closed level 2, so this is level 2. Okay, so now we are going to talk about level 2.